smiling gently at you. At most he would say, is there anything else I could do? So people would leave. I was, that many feet away, and there were occasions when I would have signs on my door which said, don't disturb, keep out, working to deadline, please. and despite all of these rude things, my office was always like a railroad station at rush hour or something. So this is one thing about Jack nobody has mentioned. It's my one original contribution. I remember Fitzcarraldo. And there's one part of the film that was not mentioned, namely Fitzcarraldo has to get from one tributary of the Amazon to another, and that involves hauling a sizable steamship up an almost vertical hill. And in the end he fails after having killed numerous natives and having the boat crush people and so on. And so this doesn't fit the Jack Hirshleifer that we know as a microeconomist. It's probably a part of the film that Jack would think was microeconomics.
Jack welcomed me and took me to the faculty club for lunch on my first day at UCLA. 30 years later, when we sat down for lunch together, he seemed exactly the same. Such breadth of knowledge, such inquisitiveness, such unassuming brilliance. I don't remember him ever flaunting his talents. I do remember a bad day for me, right near the beginning. I think it was my second year at UCLA, and I was had just finished teaching a course in a mathematical economics course. I probably called it an advanced theory course coming from MIT. And the main topic had become the economics of uncertainty and information. And it was a small group. I'm not quite sure when David was in the group. I think it was a year or two later. I finished the class and I didn't know Jack very well. And I heard that Jack had announced that he was thinking of teaching a course in uncertainty and information. Well, I'm done for. No one will come to my class. So but I didn't give up there. I went immediately to see Jack and said, well, I am actually also doing something like this. Maybe we should get together and team teach. And he said, what a wonderful idea. And that's what we did. We had so much fun, and we ended up writing a book on the economics of uncertainty and information, and I became such a devotee of Jack, and that long period of mentorship began at that time. On the day of the memorial service held at UCLA, I had to be on the East Coast, so Bev read these comments on my behalf. I'm glad I now have the opportunity to read them myself. 60 years ago, Jack was on board a warship off the coast of Japan, waiting to see if he was to be the linchpin of an attack on the mainland. Luckily for him, for all who've become his friends and colleagues, and indeed the entire economics profession, Jack was spared that fight. After such an experience, it is easy to understand why the ongoing skirmishes within human groups, such as our economics department and university, were of interest to Jack only as empirical data. He was never eager to do battle himself. There have been many tributes to Jack, and all have emphasized that, as much as anyone in the economics profession, he had an insatiable appetite for ideas. He loved to talk about what Armin Alschian might call economic forces at work. He was fascinated by the power of evolutionary forces. He explored history with equal enthusiasm. This made him a quite extraordinary colleague. But the voracious appetite for ideas does not ensure academic productivity. What Jack also had was a love for building simple mathematical models and exploring their implications. I suspect that many of his best papers began with an insight Jack would then try to develop an elegant model that would serve to further sharpen this insight and so ensure that his lesson would be widely understood and appreciated. For me, one most powerful example was his paper showing that in a market economy, the value of public information could easily be negative, or zero if you excluded the cost of opening new markets. Reading it as a graduate student, I had two thoughts. The first was one of excitement. Yes, there really were great new ideas to be discovered in economics. The second was envy. Why couldn't I have thought of that? Yes, Jack lived for ideas. He did not usually enjoy battles, but for many years, Jack had a daily battle that he relished. You might call this his happy battle. Jack loved to go on long walks through the Palisades. I've forgotten the details of how he and Phyllis ended up with a wolf dog as the baby of their family. What a dog it was. Bev and I would sometimes be out jogging, and around the corner would come Happy. Yes, that was the dog's name. Followed by Jack with his gloved hand barely hung on to a sturdy chain. We'd give a great wave, shout a welcome, and run quickly to the other side of the road. It's true. Happy was not content with running Jack ragged on these daily marches. He topped off his walk with a party trick. He would get to some spot with people around, then lie on his back and refuse to go any further. Jack would try to talk him into moving, then pull sharply on the chain. This was Pacific Palisades. It was not uncommon for Jack to be admonished by passers-by for mistreating him. A triumphant Happy would then return home. No, Jack never did master Happy, but he loved those battles. My fondest memories of Jack are of the rides we shared together to and from the Palisades. There was a phase when we were writing our book, and Jack would take the opportunity to convince me that some passage still was not clear enough for our target audience. We spent an enormous amount of time refining the text, and as I did understand all along, the effort really would pay off. The book was yet another example of Jack's extraordinary ability to communicate ideas. In the years since then, our rides were filled with discussions about economics and biology. I would often be given the title of a book that I might read. I'm embarrassed to admit that there were many that I never did get to. Perhaps Phyllis will be willing to open up a lending library for me. In our last drive, that still seems such a short time ago, we had a great discussion about the effects of China's growth on the world economy. We also talked about different scenarios for the evolution of the Chinese government. As always, Jack finished with some warm-hearted comment about how much he had learned from our discussion. And then he was gone. Jack, you know you were loved so deeply by your family, but perhaps you did not know how much you were loved by others.
If I ever needed to give a definition of a term that's famously hard to define as social capital, the shortcut would just be to point to Jack. He was a center of interesting and useful activity. And when I got here 10 years ago and was introduced to Jack, I forget in what context, I quickly discovered that if I simply followed him around, I would get to all of the interesting discussions on campus. So he was the one who introduced me to Marshak Colloquium and the Thursday lunch group, and the behavior, evolution, and culture lunches in the anthropology department. And at some point I got to trust him so completely that when he suggested I come to the Torah study group at Hillel, I said, okay. Spent the next 7 years marching through Deuteronomy at the rate of about 4 verses a week. Part of it was that Jack had enormously good taste and knew what was worth going to and what wasn't worth going to. But part of it was that wherever he was, there was going to be a serious discussion. partly because he was serious and partly because it seemed impossible not to be serious about whatever the material was with Jack in the room. And that was an enormous contribution. It's going to be very, very hard to replace.
This is also a personal note because Deepak and I were not in Los Angeles to attend the UCLA Memorial for Jack. Deepak and I said goodbye to Jack in the spring of 2005 when we left UCLA for London. But we really experienced his absence when we returned to the campus in the fall. First of all, there were no witty emails outlining the question to be discussed at the Thursday luncheon group. And indeed, that luncheon group came to be affectionately called the curmudgeon luncheon group by many of the wives of the faithful participants. And also, for those of us who were working on campus, we looked in vain for that definitive gait that Jack had, topped off by a blue floppy hat, which we knew we would eventually see somewhere on the campus. And those reminders of Jack are now absent. As most people have said, Jack was known for his intellectual depth and the broad sweep of his interests and his great curiosity, even in the field of sociology, which was quite remarkable, because he didn't consider sociology the least best of the social sciences, but in point of fact would talk to you about any topic in that area as well as others that you care to bring up to him. But what I also want to say was that Jack was a very kind and a very generous friend. On several occasions, I found myself alone in Los Angeles during the Passover holidays, and he and Phyllis inevitably included me in these wonderful family seders, which were enlivened by a dispute over each and every line of the Haggadah in all elaborations. So the matzah balls were forgotten in terms of the interpretation of what each of the four questions really meant. Also, when Jack and Phyllis traveled to London, my husband was away, but they invited me to have dinner with them at the Savoy, which is a very lovely restaurant. And we sat in the Savoy and we tried to reconstruct what each and every 19th century theorist might have been eating, drinking, and talking about over our wrap of lamb. So Jack was not only generous, kind, intellectually brilliant, but he also had a great sense of humor. And that great sense of humor made being with him a special delight. So Jack was truly a splendid person. He will be much missed by his friends, and he was, in the lingo, a real mensch.
Everyone's been talking about Jack as an intellectual. I want to talk about another sort of part of his personality, was his kindness.
Yes.
Way back when, in 1966, I came to UCLA as a graduate student. I was a Marxist who was avoiding the draft to go to graduate school. And so the thing which you can imagine is that a Marxist at UCLA was taking prize theory from Jack Hirshleifer. The thing why he was so nice was, clearly he could have destroyed me. He could have destroyed me intellectually. He destroyed me in many ways. But for some reason he saw something in me. And what he was able to do is really cultivate a love for economics and love for the methodology, which I think has been with me through all my life. We're talking about his book in terms of capital theory and his price theory book. I was from the group of people who, when he was developing it, I will remember choice theoretic structures until my deathbed. But I think the final thing is beside the intellectual and the kindness, one of the things which I saw was that, you know, as we're all getting older, we sort of see how we are doing it. So the role model for the people of my generation in looking at what we would like our life to be is to see Jack. I mean, I can still remember him coming over and having lunch at the finance table and the Anderson School, and he'd get really impatient with us. Because what we would be doing is be talking about sports, current events, and you know, David, he would say, we got to talk about something, intellectually stimulating. It was amazing how he would completely change the tenor of the conversation as he answered in school. But I'd say, sort of next to my father, Jack probably has had as much impact on my life because it's developing the sort of the intellectual sort of interest, drive, the things which have really made, a lot of tremendous pleasure for me as a person. And I know sort of for my entire group of graduate students, that was something we still talk about it many, many years, have passed.
Okay, I think those of us that are going to dinner would like to end this session. I remind everybody that everything is going to be half an hour later tomorrow than is written on the schedule. Coffee at 9, first talk at 9:30, everything extra half hour later. Coming to dinner?
Collection.